Okay, great. We know that people are going to be coming in
Hmm.
gradually here because we've got quite a few more registered as well. But it's nice to meet you all. I am Lauren Shippey, and this is Jean Roberts, and we're
I'm
excited
on this conference call now.
to spend this next hour with you all. So we're just really looking forward to it. Jean, I'll let you go ahead and intro yourself, and then we'll get started.
That sounds great. Hi, everyone. I'm Jean Roberts. I am the founder and CEO of J. Roberts Consulting. I am over in Worcester, Ohio, so just smack dab in the middle of Cleveland and Columbus. I know we've got folks from all over on here. It's nice to meet you all. My background is in nonprofits, so I've worked at a number of them over my career. I started a housing program at a domestic violence shelter and a substance abuse treatment facility. And now my company works to help serve nonprofits and help with their marketing and communications plans, as well as their development plans. So excited to meet you all.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm Lauren Shippey. For those of you who I have not met yet, I have a background in building and scaling startup companies and have worked with large and small organizations in the strategy consulting arena. I have my own company now called Storywork, and we serve as just a platform that really just contributes thought leadership and consulting, as well as the marketing engine that we'll talk about a little bit more here, to both nonprofits and businesses all over the country. So it's been really great that Jean and I have worked together. We've known each other for over a decade, so we work super well together, and we're just excited to share this information with you to really help you kick off your fiscal year in the best way possible. So Jean's going to start by just talking about the landscape here and a little bit about, what this has looked like just in terms of this past year, because we know that this has not been a typical year. So Jean is just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about what that's looked like.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lauren. So while I'm getting started here, I would absolutely love it if you all would take a moment to drop your name, the name of your organization in the chat as well, and maybe what position you have within that organization, and your links to your websites, if possible. That would be great, just so everybody can kind of network a little bit, get to know each other, and have some background knowledge about who's on the call. That would be awesome. So yes, the landscape. Obviously, we all know COVID has impacted operations. It's impacted the way we communicate, the way we do business. And I think this is important to kind of back way out for a moment and really evaluate that and evaluate what's changed before we start to get into some details in terms of how are our communication plans going to change, how are our development plans going to change as a result of that, right? So here's a couple of things that I would kind of start to think through a little bit. When it comes to fundraising, what has changed for you? So maybe ask yourself that question, over this last year, what has changed when it comes to fundraising? Are those things like we used to have a number of in-person events and we've had to move those all online, or we were able to still have some of our in-person events, but maybe they didn't perform as well as they have done in the past? What is working well for you right now? So what changes did you make that you need to, that you would want to move forward and continue? So I think there's a lot of things that we've all learned as a result of maybe some hybrid communication. So maybe that's having an in-person event, but having a portion of that live stream so that there's folks that can't typically be there in person, but can tune in from a distance. Is that something that you want to find ways to continue to utilize moving forward? And then really kind of from a programmatic standpoint, so the people that you serve, your customers or your clients, whatever you might call them, what has their access looked like, right? So what has their access to your programs looked like? Are there some things that you need to think through in terms of communication in terms of programming? So, or there are pieces of programming that were always on in person that you're now offering a different method of that particular program that you want to make sure your community knows. So again, kind of scrolling way back, and trying to say, what is the landscape and what has changed? And are there things that I need to be mindful of before I get into this plan, into this fiscal year plan of communication there? And then volunteers, if you're an organization that utilizes volunteers, really looking at that before you get into the details, the nitty-gritty details of what is your year going to look like really thinking through and asking yourself the question, what has changed with our volunteers? Do we have more of them? Do we have less of them? Are they newer volunteers that might need some more specialized training? Are we having trouble keeping them engaged? So again, just kind of asking yourself those questions and writing that down so you have that frame of mind to work through as you're getting into the details in terms of what is the landscape and what are some things that have changed that I might need to address moving forward. And feel free, if you have any questions, to pop them in the chat or things that you want to, points that you want to bring up in the middle of any of these topics. We certainly are happy to have this be kind of a Q&A time as well. So the next thing we kind of wanted to move into and chat about a little bit was re-engaging your audience and attracting a new audience. And what I think is really helpful with this is thinking through what is the theme for this year going to be. Now, there are a couple different schools of thought on if we use themes, if they're helpful, if they are internal themes that you're just thinking through, or if they're external themes that you share with your constituents and your team. But I'm gonna kind of think through this from a standpoint of, how do you get there? How do you find out what that is? And so I think asking the following questions. What do people need now more than ever? Ask yourself that question. So, what problem are we solving? And what do people need now more than ever that they are really yearning for or searching for, that our organization can fill that need? And how do we deliver that? And so I think asking yourself those questions might help you kind of hone in on what does the theme need to be for this particular year. I'll give an example. So we work with a higher education institution, and the theme for the year is "You pave the way for." Pave the way, right? And I think one of the things for them is, when you have an education through this institution, it's paving the way for their future success. Now, in their case, yes, this will play out in many of their communications, but we've also had some clients who we think through, okay, the theme for the year is actually going to be an internal theme that we don't tell anyone, but it's at the center of all of our communications, both to our team and to those that we're serving. And that theme could look something like reset, right? This is the year of reset. And so if that's the year and that's the focus for the year, then everything that we're sending out has something to do with the word reset. So that might be resetting intentions, resetting our goal. It might be resetting the way that we go about a process. So again, kind of thinking through, is your plan going to be internal or external? Is your theme going to be internal or external? And what is that theme going to be? So to ask yourself those questions, the key takeaway here is to pull back and reflect on where you're going and what do people need now more than ever from your organization to kind of help identify what is that phrase, that one phrase that we're going to hold on to this year that is going to be obvious through our communications moving forward. Lauren, do you have anything you want to add on either of those two before we move into vision here?
That's so good. Just to build off of that, I was just thinking through, and we'll get into this tactically, but just thinking through having an internal and external campaign, and this leads into casting vision. So this is where I'll go from here. But I love that you can have just an internal campaign or both internal and external with the same theme of reset. So, if I were you all, I have mine out, I'm taking notes, but if you have a piece of paper or a journal to jot down internal, external, write out your thoughts as to like the one word that comes to mind or the theme. Use this as a working session. And I would say even start to outline how, because the next question after we determine the vision is how. How will we communicate it and show that both internally and externally? So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about casting the vision. And this is really perfect. And this is important because, say some of your programs, like Jean said, you weren't able to have in-person events or fundraisers this past year, right? So say you don't have as much money raised, no way for volunteers to really engage or stay connected if a large part of your participation is in person, and participant access may have been limited depending on the program type. So now more than ever, it's really important to recast the vision to your donors, your volunteers, and your participants. So those are the three buckets that I'd love for you all to just write out on your sheet of paper and think through, how are we going to cast the vision to our donors, our volunteers, and our program participants? And I'm going to give you a few tangible ways to go ahead and reactivate that. So the first is giving your teams regular reminders of the vision. So say the one word is reset, for example. So Loom is a great tool, or recording just a short, even Zoom video, sharing stories or short quotes from those you serve that come in are great to keep the momentum and remind them of the bigger why behind these initiatives. So even just setting yourself a reminder to do this once a week or once a month to send out to your team. And this is great for both donors and volunteers to just even self-record a video. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can literally just be sharing a story or a testimonial or just a meaningful update of how your new vision for this year is unfolding and how you're going to share that and execute it. So it's really inviting them to be a part of the journey so that they feel included in the process, your donors and your volunteers. And then connect the dots for them. So really, what does this mean for their role as a donor or a volunteer? What does this mean for them and how is it connected, to the vision tangibly? So this will help them be able to connect the dots in their mind. So stating this really in a meeting or one-on-one videos really helps. So anytime we can hop on a quick call, with a donor or volunteer and go ahead and share a meaningful update, or audio text, even voice recordings, like sending them shortly to big donors saying like, hey, I just wanted to update you really quick, but this is, some of the things that we're seeing. We've got this new vision for the year and it's really based on reset. And this is how we're going to be talking to our staff and our volunteers and empower them to go ahead and share that vision across. And I just wanted to thank you for your support as a donor, because directly your funding is being used to help X, Y, and Z, right? So people love to know specifically how they have helped move the needle. I know we did this with Amy. I know Amy Nelson is actually on the call, so I'm going to use that example, but really helped her thought through. She really serves in the pregnancy crisis space and helping new moms, and they maybe can't afford all of the things that you need when you have a new baby or childcare. So some of the packages or the donor asks that she actually broke out into offerings would be things like, sponsor or support diapers, right, for X amount of months, or support one mom's childcare for this long, right? So I feel like those things are super impactful. And if you can, directly connect them back to the vision, it will carry a lot of weight. And the last thing around just casting the vision is the storytelling aspect. And this goes across the board to donors, volunteers, and participants. So storytelling is really how people connect emotionally to a vision. So collecting and sharing those testimonials is a great tool to activate engagement. I know this is a process, and I know it's usually like some of the last things on our to-do lists, but Jean and I we have a form for the marketing engine that we have sent out to clients regularly. It's simple. We just use Google Forms. It's free and easy to put together. So, it allows you to just customize it, drop your logo on there and be able to share it. So even just a reminder on your calendar quarterly to just go ahead and send that out with like a personalized video like this saying, hey, I just wanted to connect, take some time. We love sharing your stories. Thank you so much for being a part of our program. Can you just tell us what it means in this really short survey, 5 minutes? So attaching just a little video or audio clip to it really helps people, because a lot of times if they just get an email, it's very easy to ignore. But if they hear your voice, if they see your face, it's a lot easier for them to connect and engage emotionally. So I would love for you all to be able to define for yourselves what this means in terms of your donors, like how you could maybe share like one story a month. And then for your volunteers, obviously those stories are also powerful for them as well. And then connect it back to the vision. And then your participants, them hearing stories may be the thing that tips the needle for them to join the program or participate in the program, right? So all of these things are able to effectively cast your vision to re-engage this year, because I think that you're going to see some turnover, maybe some of those during COVID that reevaluated their priorities and they don't They simply don't have space, they've realized. But there also becomes an opportunity for those that have been involved to become stronger, more involved, or waiting for an invitation. So what can you do to engage those that you already have engaged further, and then attract new volunteers with those that are reevaluating their lives and kind of thinking, I need more of this in my life. So Jean, I'm going to let you chime in on this. And I know you're going to talk tactically about what it looks like to really get a plan. Oh, thanks for outlining that in the chat. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I'm just going to walk through here for you all. I'm going to drop another link down here for you to a Trello board that I'm actually going to share my screen really quickly and walk through this with you. So we've got some tangible takeaways. That link should work for you all. It should be public. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Trello, but it's a great project management system. It's a great project management tool. You should actually be able to take this board and duplicate it. Feel free to send us an email if you need any help with doing that. But what's great about this board is it's really going to walk through some of the things that are important from a planning standpoint to get a fiscal year kicked off on the right foot, both in terms of a fundraising side, but also where fundraising and communications cross, which we know those really complement each other and both are necessary for nonprofits. And so there's a lot of really good things in this board that I'll walk through quickly here today. One of the things before we get into that I just wanted to talk about, one of the things that I love, what Lauren brings to the table in terms of working with our clients is talking through making sure people feel seen, known, and heard. And I think one of the things that is so important to that is to, at this time of year, step back and evaluate how is your organization doing that. And one of my favorite ways to talk through this is actually in the form of stewardship. So I love talking a lot about stewardship, donor retention, volunteer retention, and making people feel appreciated. So I think before you do anything else on thinking through communications, thinking through asking for funding, I think it's important to actually start first with who do you need to thank? And how are you going to do that? Because one of the statistics that I think is really interesting is that you are actually 84% more likely to retain or get more increased dollars from a donor that you already have than you are to acquire a new donor. And so I think that's something important for you to hear and to know, which is that the more our donors feel thanked and valued, you are more likely to get higher donation amounts from them than you are to acquire a new donor. And so thinking through a really important stewardship plan, I think is such a key part of starting your fiscal year. Not only that, but we talk a lot about thanking our staff, thanking our teams, because retention there is also just as important. The people who feel appreciated, seen, known, and heard will continue to work well as a team and will continue to work harder. There's a lot of research behind that as well. So one of the things that I like to do, and Lauren, we can maybe make a note to send this in the follow-up materials, is we actually wrote out kind of a month-by-month stewardship focus. So things that you should focus on a monthly basis and who should you thank? There's actually a blog post that Lauren has on Storywork that walks through this. And I think that's a really important thing to do before you even start writing out your plan for asking, is first making sure before you even think about asking for more money, is really going back through and making sure that you have thanked folks who have given to you. I see a really great question. How do these themes differ from our strategic plan? That's great. They should work really, I would say, together. So I think looking at your strategic plan, and Lauren, feel free to hop in if you have thoughts on this, because I know you love a good strategic plan, so I'm sure you do. I think one of the things that's really important is to pull out all of those documents at the beginning as we're thinking through planning for a new fiscal year. So pull out the strategic plan and think about what are the focuses for the year. But the theme is really, how do you communicate that in a tangible way? So you're obviously not going to send out to your donors, here's our entire strategic plan for the year. I know some organizations do, but oftentimes you're not sending out the step-by-step. That tends to be a more of an internal document. The theme is really surrounding something that will get people motivated and coming together beyond that strategic plan. And it can be the means to completing a strategic plan. So I'm going to go back to that higher education institution I was using an example. They have a strategic plan that they have recently launched because they have new leadership. And I think one of the things that's great about that strategic plan is it focuses a lot on connecting communities. And that's one of the biggest things within their plan is to redo their student center, which they're launching. They're they broke ground and they're completing an addition right now. And I think what's cool about that is the theme ties into that strategic plan, because we're saying you pave the way. So donors, you pave the way for these students to change the world, or you pave the way for our faculty and staff to teach excellently. So, we can take that theme and we can end that sentence any way we want that works into whatever the messaging is for that particular communication that we're sending out there. But paving the way, right? The plan within their strategic plan for creating this connected community is basically showing what they believe to be a point of differentiation for them, which is that they graduate global leaders or people that are able to change the world because they have a broader perspective because of everything that they've been exposed to during their time there. And I think what's important about that is that donors need to feel connected to that experience. They need to feel like, okay, my gift is paving the way for a student to have that experience at this institution, to be a part of that student center. Everything that's within that student center is helping them within that experience. It's helping them connect. It's helping them learn. It's helping them grow. And so my gift is a part of that experience, which then is paving the way for them to go out and change the world. Before that, we've been on kind of a world theme with them, but before that, it was your gift allows these students to change the world. So it was the world needs, and then the name of that education, and your gift allows this school to change the world, right? And the year before that, I think it was you are at the center of this experience. And so it's the theme allows you to give people something to connect with, so that you can pick one thing. It's hard, you don't want it to be too complicated. You want to pick one quick statement that is going to make them feel connected to that mission and to that vision, and really understand how they're playing, like Lauren said, connecting the dots, how they're playing a role in that. Whereas the strategic plan is going to have maybe 3 points to 5 points that have a lot of sub points within it. So again, the theme should be short, ideally 1 sentence, 1 or 2 sentences, sometimes just 1 word, like the word reset. And it allows them to feel connected, or their work to feel connected to the mission and vision, or as a donor, their gift to feel connected to the mission and vision of that organization. So I hope that helps answer that question. So I think that's an important clarification to make. And I think within stewardship, when we're talking about thanking, that is really what should set the foundation. Retention is what sets the foundation, both for volunteers, as it is for employees. We all know that the longer we can retain someone, obviously, the more of an expert they become with their craft. So retention is really the name of the game there, and then along with donors as well. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and walk through this development plan. Lauren, if you don't mind, sorry, giving me the screen share capability. Awesome, thank you. All right, so here we are. And again, feel free to stop me. So this is set up for, as you can see, a July through June fiscal year. You can duplicate this board if you are a calendar year, fiscal year organization as well, and change this out a little bit. But one of the things that I like about this process is that you can really see how each month builds upon the month previously. And it also gives the ability to, break out, and we've put some things in here that are breaking out things that are based on daily, weekly, monthly tasks as well. But one of the things that I love to highlight is conducting a feasibility analysis. So if you're an organization that raises funds and you rely heavily on donated funds, whether those are from individuals, grants, or corporate donations, I think it's really important that you actually look at what you're asking of organizations and that you're mindful of that. So what this looks like, we've worked with an organization in the past, or I worked for an organization in the past, where they had a really lofty goal on an annual basis, to the tune of, they wanted to get to a point of $5 million to raise on an annual basis from individual donors. And they were about at the 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 range. They were having a really hard time breaking past that. And one of the first things we did was look through and conduct a feasibility analysis. And actually, Rachel from my team is on the call. And Rachel, if you feel free to pop in on any of this, because I know you were really integral in putting a lot of this together. Things are waiting. So Rachel's really an expert at data and analyzing data and helped with this process. But I think one of the things that was eye-opening to us is when we actually went through and added up all of the ask amounts. So the amounts that we were actually asking people to donate to the organization, they didn't add up to the goal. And we all know that, you have to ask significantly more people for significantly more dollars than what your goal is. And so I guess the first question I always ask is, have you added up your ask amounts? Do you have ask amounts? Do you have customized ask amounts for each one of your donors, both for a grant fund, for corporate donors, and for individual donors? And so doing the work at the beginning of the fiscal year to look at, pull a simple report, ask whoever has that data for you in your organization to give you literally every single household and organization and grant funder, their name and how much they gave last fiscal year. Take a look at that and come up with, what is that total? So you should know that should be on your annual report recently, but do you have it broken down by person? And then if you've got an increased goal, obviously looking at what is that increased goal and what do these donors who gave last year need to increase their giving at in order for me to hit that goal. So for us, we're oftentimes multiplying their last year's gift by 1.5. And then we're getting that increased amount. So for organizations we work with, that's really the formula that we try to get them to a point where that's the increase we're applying each year. And that doesn't take into account any acquisition, right? So that is just what we would call LIBUNTs last year, but unfortunately not this year is what LIBUNT stands for. So our LIBUNT donors. So I think that's important first and foremost to conduct that feasibility analysis. It's also important to consider running a wealth screening on your data. So there's a lot of organizations out there that do this. Oftentimes we are only calculating based on what donors have given us in the past. There's a great software system, if you're not familiar with it, called Bloomerang. That's a donor management software system. Within that software system, they give you the ability to use a platform called Donor Search, which just run a simple screening on your database and give you a target ask amount. That's important data for you to have. There's a lot of independent operations out there that can give you this same data, but taking a look at your donors and having a really good understanding of, okay, they might give me $100 as an organization, but their full philanthropic capacity is actually to give $10,000 a year. Can I ask for more? And so being equipped with that data is really important at the beginning of the fiscal year to walk through. One of the things we like to do, I'm going to hop down to this drafting your solicitation frames. It's important to do that at an early basis. Now, obviously, if we've learned anything from COVID, it's the ability to we need to be able to, we all love this overused word now, pivot at any moment's notice. So drafting these frames might seem a little bit scary, but when you write, let's say you're going to send 2 letters a year or 4 letters a year. If you write those all at the beginning of the year, when you have your frame in mind, you've got this ability to tell a story. And that is really something that becomes very effective because the donors feel like they have been a part of a narrative throughout an entire year. And one of the things that's also important for us when we're drafting these direct mail solicitation frames, we're also drafting at the same time, what is the thank you version of that message, right? So every time that we're sending out a solicitation, we're also sending out a thank you to anybody who has given up to that point. So in our case, in most cases, once somebody has made a gift, we're not asking them a second time for the year. So that means once they've made a gift, they're not getting a solicitation version of a message, they're getting a thank you version of a message. So writing all of that at the beginning of the year saves you some time. Lauren, I know this one is something that is really important to you, and I'm going to let you speak to this for a second, but I think the importance of stepping out and having someone audit your giving experience or your volunteer experience. I don't know if you want to talk through a little bit how you conduct a website audit from a usability standpoint when it comes to these areas.
Yeah, you actually read my mind because I just written down to talk a little bit about the journey map and the experience. So for those of you who are not familiar with the journey map, it's something that we talk a lot about with our clients. And that's really, it's a user experience tool. And what it does is really evaluate the experience from the very first time that they hear about you or start giving with you or volunteering, right, or participating, all the way through what we call the marketing funnel. And that's moving them through the process to the time that they become a regular engaged participant with you, and then become a brand advocate. So the goal is always to empower and equip them to become a brand advocate, give them a great experience so that that organic word of mouth strategy follows, right? So particularly if we're looking at the volunteer and the donor process, I'd love for you all to just write down let's start with volunteer. So what does the process look like for them as you really add delight? The idea is to add delight into their process, something that really wows them during certain moments. And it doesn't have to be big, but these little things move the needle a lot. So think of a time that you had an experience where something was really delightful. I mean, I know I recently flew on JetBlue, and I could say that always they're free, good snacks. My children love winning right there. Big point of delight. And the fact that they have TV screens that have great shows on them, also winning. Okay. So those things, it's clean, it's basic, they've got the experience down, and it's an element of delight. I love to talk about the popsicle hotline too. If you guys aren't familiar with it, it's the best story ever. There's this little boutique hotel out in California. It's a little bit run down. It's looking a little sad, but they are always full because they have an infamous popsicle hotline. And that means that they have an old school phone out by their pool, and you can pick it up at any moment, and the popsicle hotline will answer and bring you free popsicles on a silver platter by the pool. I mean, did you ever think of something so simple, but kind of ridiculous? And they have articles written about them all over the world. So there are these elements that when we turn on are the dreaming part of ourselves that seems to get lost in the everyday, right? We get bogged down with all of the things that we have to do, with all of the, the daily activities and routines. But I would just encourage you to use this time to step back and dream a little bit about what you might be able to do for your volunteers that adds delight into the process. So in the beginning, they may see your social media, they may hear about your organization word of mouth, then they may go to your website, right? And when they get to your website, can they find clearly a space that tells them exactly what you do and who you serve and your bullet pointed offerings, how you serve the people in the community? That's most important. And then can they find a space once they meander around the website that is particularly for them, a volunteer tab that has at any given moment the volunteer positions that you have available and some kind of overview video that casts the vision and connects the dots. And this could be one that you also self-record, again, like we were talking about in the vision casting portion of this for your internal team. But this could be as simple as recording a video talking about the vision for this year, how you're serving people, the positions available, almost like a virtual tour, kind of giving them an experience, walking them through the volunteer opportunities that you have, and then connecting it specifically with outcomes. Like, here's how you would be helping us by doing this role. And better yet, here's how this will also serve you. We find that our participants X, Y, and Z, and maybe you share a written testimonial from a volunteer, or even you have a short clip of a volunteer on talking with you saying like, hey, how did this program impact your life? How has serving made all the difference for you? And so I think then when they can find that and then they can reach out and engage with you, then it's the process of thinking through, what does the volunteer process look like? How can we make it as easy as possible, knowing that they're doing this with their extra time? So if there's easy ways to communicate, like clear email, maybe it's a Google Voice number that they can text, right, to confirm their times. Anything that really clearly outlines the process. An email that tells them the first time, like, here's what you can expect, X, Y, and Z, right? This is what your volunteer experience will look like. And then they show up and it's consistent with that. And then maybe after even just that first time of volunteering, the thank you that they get. And maybe there's a local organization that you can partner with that would be willing to help out or share the cost of maybe a thank you gift for your volunteer, right? The first time, just a little something that can help them. Because I think that, these experiences impact people, like a little handwritten note, like, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining our vision this year. We're so excited to have you, along with something small, a small gift, maybe even that you hand to them on the way out the door. They will then go and talk about that, right? So one of our clients is actually a gym. So just to give you an example of something, we were going through their journey map, we were designing their experience. And one of the things about this gym is that it can be a little bit intimidating to people when they first start. I felt that way when I first walked in. And so we designed an experience where they have a water bottle waiting for them. And we now have pods post-COVID that have, that are squared off. And I said, write their name in chalk in their pod, and have the welcome team ready. You greet them in the parking lot. And you say, hey, like, welcome to your first day. We're so excited you're here. Let me show you around. And then they know that they have a customized pod and they've got a water bottle waiting. I would go and tell people about that experience. Absolutely. And there's your word of mouth strategy. So you genuinely serve people and then you get them talking, right? Just because of the way that you're serving them. So that's a little about the volunteer experience. Now, if you imagine that for the donor experience, what can that look like similarly? So if they hear about you, if they have friends that give, think about the process that they may go through to reach out to get in touch with you or engage with you. And Jean, this is where I'm sure you probably have some specific thoughts about how they might enter that journey, right? Because a lot of times it's word of mouth or it's a fundraiser event that they come to because of friends, right? But then what does that experience look like after they give? Is there a handwritten note with a gift? What is the next step in that process for them?
Absolutely. So I dropped in the chat a link to a book that kind of changed the way that that our team has kind of thought through stewardship and donor stewardship, and it's The Power of Moments: Why Experiences Have Extraordinary Impact. And if you think through, Lauren, I loved your JetBlue example. You think through moments that stand out to you, whether it's a business that you've interacted with or an experience that you've had. If you can make it feel like a really big moment to them, that becomes a hook. That's something that they want to be a part of moving forward. And Rachel, I'm actually going to put you on the spot and kick this over to you for a second. But one of the things that I think Rachel did a really great job of creating for when we were working together with this higher education institution that I keep referencing, I think one of the things that she did a good job of really creating is the experience of entering the higher level donor experience. So, when donors give under a certain amount, they were getting kind of a standard level of communication. But once they hit the threshold for this institution and they made their first gift that entered them into this circle of elite donors, Rachel created a really awesome moment with a welcome package. So Rachel, I'll let you talk through that and just kind of some of the communication plans that they then got specialized communication throughout the year as a result of that.
Sure. So I think for me, the level that we really were looking at was 3,000 or above, but depending on your organization, it could be 1,000, it could be 500. But at that point, people are really investing in your mission and they're investing that money in, what you're going to be doing with your organization. I think people are often willing to donate $50 or $100, but when you're really moving up into those higher brackets, it becomes a discussion with their spouse or with their partner or, looking over their financials. And so for me, what I tried to share was just the gratitude of us understanding that they're making this investment, that this isn't an easy decision because they could spend that $1,000 in other ways, or $3,000 or $5,000. So that's kind of how I approach any kind of stewardship thought, or when I was connecting with that donor, it was very much, updating them on what we're doing with that gift. How are we using it to make a difference for that organization, whether it's, specific items or just in general to remind that person why the organization is important and what that mission is. for some of the communication, a lot of it was just based around language and using the investment language, calling them leaders, calling them people we can count on, that they're critical to the organization. And so it is a lot of what every donor was receiving, but I think it was on what I tried to do was put it on a level that was personal so that we were connecting with them as an individual, that the organization is actually seeing them and recognizing them, and that we are thankful that they are there. And so some of the packages included a lot of just like handwritten notes and little touches. There was a magnet that we created for them because for me, I always I'm a practical person, so I like things that people can put on their fridge or somewhere in a visual area that they will constantly be thinking back on us and what we're doing. And then I think just, events, if that's something, whether it's virtual or maybe it's instead of an event, it's a small package. And again, that's just in the hopes that the individual that's making those gifts is feeling like there's a relationship that goes back both ways, and not just we're expecting them to give us this money every year. And, and which obviously we are hoping that happens, but we want to do it in a way that's thoughtful and meaningful to that individual that we're working with.
Yeah, I love the phrase you would always say, relational, not transactional, right? And I think that's a phrase you still use moving forward. And I love every time you say that. And I think one of the things that was so cool about what Rachel put together and has put together is building for so many of our clients is that feeling that they've got access because of their investment, they've got access to a higher level of information, right? And so I think thinking through at the beginning of the year, what is that information that you can provide to them, as whether, that doesn't necessarily just have to be for donors. You could also provide that to your volunteers by saying, you've invested in our organization, so we want to make sure that you're a part of this information. So that could be hearing from a member of your leadership team, maybe once a quarter, somebody different. Maybe it's your CFO that writes a little blurb to them that goes over your financial statements a little bit and explains some of the decisions you've made from a financial standpoint. Maybe that's your board of directors chair that's writing a letter to donors. So I think sometimes it doesn't always have to feel like it's you, because I know our time is limited. We work in nonprofits and this can all feel so overwhelming. And so I think the importance of this time, and I love that you're all investing your time today in planning, because that is really the most efficient use at the beginning of a fiscal year, is to come up with a plan and to think through who can help you. And so to that note, I think transitioning over a little bit to talking through how we can integrate your board of directors into this and activating your board. I think that's something that is just so important and something that we oftentimes can get lost in the day-to-day and forget to interact with our board just because we've got board meetings and a lot of other opportunities to do that. So another really great resource. I don't know how many of you have heard of Joan Gary and the Nonprofit Leadership Lab. I always love her content. She does just a phenomenal job. So I dropped a link in the chat here, which we'll also share afterwards, which is a phenomenal document that goes over a lot of what we're talking about today, but it's the 14 attributes of a thriving nonprofit. And she's got a lot of great documents and resources around board development and board governance. But one of the things that I think is so important at this time of year, when we talk about fiscal year planning, is to really, kind of scroll back, stand back a little bit and look at your board, spend the time to do that as a leadership team and say, all right, literally write out everybody's name, write out where they work, what strengths they bring to the table. And then, on another sheet of paper, if you're on a whiteboard, write out what are all the board skill sets that an ideal board has. So what are all the things that you would like your board to be able to advise you on? So is that having legal expertise, financial expertise, another nonprofit? This is one that almost always gets overlooked, but another nonprofit executive. Some people might say, why would I want that? Well, the reason is, who is going to better advocate for you? Who is going to better advocate for the unique challenges you have as a nonprofit leader than another nonprofit leader? So oftentimes putting another nonprofit leader on your board can provide, in those executive session conversations, somebody else that can advocate for the unique difficulties and the unique challenges that you face. And so I think that's important. So Again, maybe somebody that's used the services that you offer. Is that an important voice to bring to the board? I would always advocate for yes, it is. And so I think writing down what are the skill sets that you need on one side, and then writing down your board members and what skill sets they bring to the table on another side, and finding out if you have gaps. If you don't have any gaps, congratulations, that's amazing. The next thing to do is to write out your committees. So write out every single committee that you have on your board. Maybe you don't have committees. Maybe that's something you want to focus on. Maybe it's a small board and you all function together and working through all of those committee functions. If that's the case, there's still an important exercise to go through of writing out what are the functions of the board. So the easiest way to do this is by writing out each committee and giving them 1 or 2 goals that you would really like them to focus on for that year. So if it's your outreach committee, and your outreach committee is primarily, some people call this external committee, and they're primarily focused on event planning and helping with fundraising, then maybe your 2 goals for them are to help plan your big event, your annual event of the year. Maybe you only have 1, or maybe they are responsible for multiple. And maybe it's also, we would like your help in identifying three big corporations that we can go after. So give them 2 very tangible goals. So 2 tangible goals for each committee. And then I think looking who is in those committees. One of the things that I see happen with boards often, we have a client we're working with that has a lot of people on the board. And I laugh because I look at that board and I see over time what's happened is people have just brought their friends in, and that's natural, right? But what happens is, if there's not a rubric to kind of put this against in terms of what skill sets do we need on our board, then that is what's going to happen. People are going to bring in friends or people they know. And there's not always clear expectations for what board involvement looks like, which is what also creates some complications throughout a fiscal year. So taking this time now at the beginning of the fiscal year to identify who is on the board, what are their strengths, what are the goals of either the board or the committees that you have. So give 2 tangible goals, and then ask somebody to hold the responsibility for those goals. And you pick who those people are. So when I was getting into that statement about we see people pull their friends onto the board, what becomes a challenge there is that we pull friends on the board without an understanding of what need are they meeting within the board, and do they have a real expectation of what we're expecting from them, and have you defined what that expectation is? Have a gift amount, have a skin in the game required minimum gift amount, and make sure that's clear. Have a skin in the game required volunteer hour amount, and make sure that is also clear. And those things can obviously be amended on a case-by-case basis. We know not every, you don't want to by any means make people feel like the only reason they're invited to the board is because they have the capacity to give. If the capacity is only $5, I think at least 100% board participation is feasible, right? So I think asking that and being very clear about that at the beginning is important, and being very clear about the expectations of time, and writing that document, almost a board of directors job description, so that that's something that you can give to your board and give them clear expectations of the direction that you're looking for from them for the year. So as we're talking about activating that board, this resource that I dropped in the chat has some really wonderful resources all together. As I said, there's 14 points in there, and she's got some great additional links within that document that you can look at. But what I love that she really walks through here, clarity of board roles. So that's number 6 on that document that I put in the chat, and it's actually on page 8. You can see within there's a template for a board orientation, how to build a effective executive committee, and critical interview questions for nonprofit board members. Those are 3 really wonderful documents to take a look at right now at this time before you start talking about activating them. And then one of the things that Lauren and I always recommend is setting time aside in your calendar to really start working through what is your communication plan going to be with your board of directors, and write yourself a template. So again, we'll share with you what that stewardship template looks like for donors. We'll also share with you what this board communication template could look like for your board of directors. But again, it's a bi-month topic of here's some things that, here's some questions that we think that you should share with them. So Lauren, I don't know if you want to hop in here, but there are things like, what are you most proud of? What's an accomplishment you're most proud of over the past month? What's a problem that you're trying to solve or you're trying to work through right now that you would like their help with? I'm sure many of you, we always get a laugh when we say this. I'm sure many of you are saying if they would only pay more attention to the communication we've sent out, because they're bringing up these ideas in board meetings that we actually do. So if that's the case and you feel like that's happening to your organization, then in this board communication, remind them of what's happened over the past month. Here's the events we just completed. Here's the story, maybe a testimonial of someone you're serving, and maybe one of your top performing social media posts or something to that extent, to remind them of all the work that is happening. Board engagement is critical. Planning that board engagement at the beginning of your fiscal year is even more critical, because we all know that once we get into the day-to-day, it becomes incredibly difficult to set that time aside. So schedule yourself, maybe the first Friday of the month, you schedule yourself an hour where you're just quickly filling out that template and you're sending it out. It will go leaps and bounds in terms of making your board feel like they are seen, known, and heard, and like they are valued. And so we cannot stress enough communicating what is the one thing you're struggling with this month, because you might be surprised. You might have a board member who says, I struggled with that exact same thing at my organization, and here's a resource for how I got through it. Or, hey, I'd like to take you to lunch and talk through that. Let me hear more about that. And that only gives you a little bit more buy-in when you might have to propose a change, whether that's a change in personnel or a change in direction in terms of programming. If you've got somebody that already understands the thought process that you've gone through, or if they already know that that's been a struggle and it wasn't just a decision you're springing on them like that, because you put that out in your board report, then that buy-in is a little bit easier to walk through there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just looking real quickly, Lauren, if there's anything else you have to add that I'm looking through on the timeline board here. Reporting. So I think one of the things to really think through is working with your team to set up effective reporting. So think through, what do we feel like we didn't have a good grasp on this last year? Do we have a dashboard? So does that dashboard show both engagement in terms of donors, dollars raised, number of donors that are currently engaged, number of volunteers, and the number of people that we're serving? What are those metrics, and how have you created a dashboard where you as the leadership team feel like you can really see a good picture of where you're at day to day? And do you have a great way to walk through projections that you can give to your board of directors from a fundraising standpoint? So those are all templates we have. If you need those, feel free to reach out to us and let us know. But working through those reporting documents and getting those templates set for the year is also really, really important.
Yeah, so you all should have my email address, but Jean can drop hers in the chat. And then I did want to share an upcoming resource of something that we have. If you think, okay, I really need more, this is great information, but how do I apply all of this at one time? I just wanted to share my screen because we are launching, Jean and I, a mastermind group, and it meets once a month for 90 minutes on Zoom, just like this, except it's a little bit more interactive. So you guys would be able to chime in, ask specific questions, give specific updates on what's happening within your organization, and have a resource or a place to bring any issues that you're encountering, and we can help you problem solve them and come up with solutions. So I dropped the link in the chat, so you guys have the link. I'm not going to read all of this, but it's launching September 1st. So we've got a couple weeks here that gives you some time to think through this, but you can see exactly what we're going to be covering in each of the sessions. There's a theme for each month. Things like segmenting your database to make sure that you're reaching all of your groups of people in meaningful ways, ask methodology, writing effective solicitations, analyzing your donor results like Jean spoke to today, stewardship that drives retention, and board engagement to build word of mouth. So we get more tactical, more specific, and give you actual plans and action items that will move the needle for you. So you guys can check this out. There's some testimonials on here. And then there's just the details. It's 6 months, like I said, once a month on Zoom from 12 to 1. We recorded a podcast episode inside of one of our nonprofit mastermind sessions, so you can listen in if you want. And then here are the payment plans. So it's $129 a month for that, $774 total. We also have a Slack channel that we maintain throughout the month where we drop all the resources like the ones that you've seen today. This is just a preview of it, as well as just support if you have any questions throughout the month. So we'd love to have you join us for that. And we'll be sending the replay of this recording to you all. Feel free to pass it on to friends that you think would find this helpful or benefit from it. And we're just thankful for your time. So thank you so much for joining us.
Bye, everyone.